Bloodwave is an incredible build. From the moment you pick up the two key aspects in Kesmi's Legacy, you're extremely powerful. It's a spike in damage that took me from Torment 1 to Torment 4 difficulty instantly, even if I had to figure out my armor and resistances quickly because I was one-shotting everything but still folding like a lawn chair. I've had a great amount of fun playing this build in Season 7. I want to give a quick video on how to get started, how to play it, what kind of things to remember and look out for, and some things I've noticed while playing that weren't apparent or spelled out when I first started. Full disclaimer, I'm not a build creator or some crazy mathematician. There are people much smarter and better at that kind of thing than me. I'm just a cat. I mostly followed the Maxroll guide as far as skills, gear, and Paragon went, and deviated here and there depending on how I liked the feeling of certain things or where I needed to fill in gaps. Currently at 45 hours played, I can clear Pit 130 with a non-min-maxed super optimal version of the build, and it's pretty simple and requires very little effort. I could easily push further than this with some optimization tweaks, better gear, retempering, and upgrading my witch powers, which aren't even close to maxed or optimal. But I've been fine where I'm at and with how it feels. And if I want to make that push, I'll decide to at a later date. Both all my glyphs max, including ones for my alternate build, Pit 150 is just a flex. So step 1, how to get started. The three main things you need to get started with Shadow Bloodwave are two aspects and the unique pants. All of these in theory can be purchased if you have the gold, and in some cases purchasing a cheap Kesemes may be easier than farming Lord Zier, who's the one who drops them. The title aspect is a drop, so you have to check weapons, gloves, rings, and amulets as you go, or purchase it from somebody. Fast Blood can be acquired from Iron Hold and Hawazar, but it's only a 1 second per blood orb roll, which can make this feel clunky at early gear levels. We'll talk about how to work around this in a moment. I'll also give a special mention to Ultimate Shadow, which while not required to start the build, it is needed to make the Shadow passives affect Bloodwave. So if for some reason you don't have Ultimate Shadow when you swap, you can maybe put those passive points elsewhere. Once you have these three things and are level 60, you can swap over to this build. You'll immediately notice the crazy damage increase without all your glyphs and paragons set up. The aspects I used and highly suggest to make this feel better are Hardened Bones for damage reduction, you'll need it, Cursed Aura to apply Decrepify, giving you your cooldown reduction and stuns from Bloodwave lucky hits, extra damage from amp damage passives, and synergizing with the Frailty Paragon board later on for damage. Grasping Veins is great to massively boost your crit and early gear levels. Sacrificial can massively boost your overpower damage, crit damage, and crit chance. However, I used it early on to cap my resistances when my gear was bad, using the sacrifice on skeletal defenders to help out. Disobedience is another option to help with armor if you don't have good skull gems or lacking armor or armor tempers on gear, want to scale up as fast as possible. Last but not least, Vehement Brawlers gives you additional damage when casting an ultimate and an extra 2 ranks to Bloodwave at all times. As far as how to spec out your Paragon, I suggest following the Maxroll guide linked in the description. It's what I used, and I found it easy and smooth. I will say when looking at Paragon boards, a tip I can give is always aim for what you need. If your damage is fine but you're dying, try to snag more resistance nodes, or look at armor nodes that you can deviate to that are close by. Look for temporary fixes to make yourself happy and make things comfortable. Respecking is really cheap. Now all that's out of the way, before we move on, since this is getting started section, let's talk about if you have a 1 second fast blood from the dungeon. I was fortunate enough in my playthrough to snag a 2.6 fast blood early on after hitting 60, but most people won't be that fortunate. I still check every ring and amulet to see if fast blood is on it just to give it out to people in my stream chat because it seems very rare as a drop. If you have only the dungeon version, there's a few things you'll want to do to try to make this feel smoother. First off, put it on your amulet for the additional 50% aspect boost, allowing it to become 1.5 seconds per blood orb. The next step, temper ultimate CD on your rings and amulet, which you're going to do anyway for this build, but this is crucially important if you have a low rank fast blood. An amulet that already has cooldown on it here can be a plus, as well as trying to get a helmet with cooldown on it as well. Obviously a GA of these will help even further, but the entire point of stacking all those cooldowns is getting Bloodwave CD down to a point where you can minimize the amount of orbs you need to pick up and where this just feels better. As for how to help with this a bit further, let's move on to step 2, how to play the build. Bloodwave is pretty straightforward when you first pick it up, but the more you play it, you start to see the little tricks and movements you need to get used to. The build functions like this. You cast Bloodwave, it starts summoning waves on each side of you, 6 waves in total over 3 crashes. And as it does this, it spawns 6 blood orbs per wave summon, totaling 18 orbs. These orbs are spread across the area of the waves summoned on each side of you. Blood orbs serve multiple functions both early and later in the min-maxing versions. 1, they give you cooldown on Bloodwave, letting you recast it once the crashes are over. 2, they stack up Rathnus Vigor to 15 so your next Bloodwave crashes are all guaranteed overpowers. 3, they stack up Blood Begets Blood legendary node on your Paragon, giving you 50% multiplicative damage. And 4, they heal you. So you hit Bloodwave, you run around grabbing orbs to cool down Bloodwave and stack Rathnus to 15, and then you cast Bloodwave again. repeat. This is the simplest, easiest rotation of the build, and you can literally just do this and clear 100 plus pits once you're geared and have fleshed out Paragon. Realistically though, that's not all you want to do. We're also going to be spamming Corpse Tendrils. Corpse Tendrils gives you crit and crit damage if you're running Grasping Veins, but also because we take Blighted Corpse Tendrils, they spawn Blood Orbs at a 35% proc rate on each enemy they pull in. This helps with Rasmus stacks, cooling down Bloodwave, and especially useful early on when you don't have good CDR or a good fast blood. It also puts Blood Orbs on top of you if you're standing inside monsters spamming Bloodwave, and makes you need to run around less, and leaves more real estate of orbs around you in case you need them. Now that's your first two actions. Let's add in a third and fourth. The third, which is very easy and only needed when you're pit pushing, and only needed if you're not one-tapping packs with a single Bloodwave, and that's Blight. You'll Bloodwave, Corpse Tendrils, and Blight the pack as it gets pulled in for extra damage from Supernatural Blight. The fourth action, which is easier than Blight, is Corpse Explosion. At a low end of needing more damage and not wanting to spam buttons, you can just hit this once every 6 seconds to proc Fueled by Death and gain more multiplicative damage. At a high end, you're spamming it to proc Flesh Eater. This node is a huge multiplier for damage, but only used when pit pushing or things that just aren't dying. So at the high end of this build, when pushing content, you're casting Bloodwave, which because of its high lucky hit chance, almost always procs Hued Flesh to give you a corpse. That corpse then can be hit with Corpse Tendrils, and then you can Blight and begin spamming Corpse Explosion as you pick up orbs and recast Bloodwave. The cycle then becomes keep hitting Bloodwave on cooldown with 15 Rathma stacks, keep Blight up, and keep spamming Tendrils and Corpse Explosion. This is the easiest form of the gameplay loop, and when you get into the extreme mathematical min-maxed version, there's a few more steps. I'll detail them briefly, but in the description I'm going to leave a link to the video of the build creator, Lord Xara. He has a much more detailed, in-depth, deep dive breakdown that goes into a lot more of the math. This video is more about how to play it and an easy quick guide. On bosses in the pit, if you aren't killing them in just a few blood waves and are pit pushing, the gameplay loop doesn't change much. Keep Blight up, keep spamming Tendrils to stagger the boss, and try to time your Flesh Eater 5 Corpse Explosion proc with the stagger, all while spamming Bloodwave. You won't have as many orbs available because you aren't tendriling 20 monsters in a pack, but after a few blood waves, you'll have plenty to cast with 15 Rothmas every time. It takes some practice, but you'll get used to it after a few high-level pit bosses to where it becomes second nature. Now that's just running the pit. As for overworld content, unless your gear is severely lacking and you just started, you'll spend 90% of your time hitting Bloodwave and Corpse Tendrils, grabbing orbs, and then moving on because you're going to one-shot everything you encounter. And speaking of moving on, let's move on to how the build feels, and what I've done with it as far as gameplay, how to decide your runes, and how to decide what you want to play with it. So step 3 is feeling out the build as you progress to endgame. The version I play is more fun and fast than fully optimal, but it's only 1 or 2 changes for me to go fully min-max and pit push. So when I want to do that, I can. But right now I've gotten all my glyphs to 100, cleared 130 pit, and can just relax and do whatever I want. Let's talk about rune choices. The runes I run differ depending on what I'm doing. When you're starting out, depending on the runes you have, I suggest running Igni Zal to give you a pretty decent uptime on higher max health for more damage and survivability. And if you want to ensure you're capping your crit and Grasping Veins isn't doing it, then Zan and Gar will massively increase crit chance. What I run on most cases when trying to be fast is Zan Ja so that I can teleport every 2 blood waves, and Igni Zal. The min-max version of this build is going to run Igni Quacks and Zan Watt. Igni Quacks is an interesting interaction to get used to, and I personally need more practice with it. Basically, Igni builds up offering over time, and your next cast of a non-basic consumes that stored offering to give it to the rune, in this case which would be Quacks, below it, which once reaching 400 offering will make your next non-basic ability consume all of your essence to deal 100% increased damage. When you're pit pushing, this amount of damage is crazy on Bloodwave, and you need it for pushing higher tiers. However, it's a learning curve. It can be clunky, because Quacks gets used on any non-basic. This means Tendrils, Corpse Explosion, Blight, and even Blood Mist can eat the Quacks effect. This means your playstyle now adds on looking at the buff down on your bar to keep an eye on when it's filled up, and Quacks can be triggered to ensure that you use Bloodwave on it. I struggled with this, but can see myself getting used to it, but I stress this that you only need this when pushing. Zanwat allows you to put Exploiters on your boots, giving you more multiplicative damage because things are inevitably going to become unstoppable after a few Blood Waves and Corpse Tendrils. This also gives you Horror Decrepify, which lets you execute enemies under 10% health. This helps a lot at much higher pit tiers. I personally love movement speed. I love getting around fast and clearing quickly. This is why I opt for teleport 90% of the time, as well as high movement speed on my boots. And I guess GA movement on my Perditions is okay. I wanted crit, but whatever. On that topic, let's talk about mythics. You want Perdition, you want False Death. Both are massive damage increases and core to the endgame of the build. As far as build feel, you're going to obviously need to rearrange things as you get them. Getting them can mean losing large chunks of armor or cooldown depending on what was tempered and rolled on your chest and helmet, as well as what aspects you might have had. Keep this in mind when switching to them, but know that you need to for the high end of this build. Make your rune choices, your gem choices, your paragon choices, and your difficulty content decisions all based on what's comfortable. Don't push into T4 if you're getting frustrated with how often you die. Don't run crazy high pits if they take 10 plus minutes and your glyphs can be leveled up quickly in pits that only take 3 to 5. Keep yourself having fun and don't struggle. That's what I try to do. Diablo 4 is not a crazy min-max super giga push game for most people, and it doesn't need to be for you. As you progress, keep an eye out for GAs, new versions of your gear, and grab restoration scrolls from Abyssal Hordes to reroll GAs that you inevitably brick tempers on. That way you can have 2 chances to irreversibly raise your blood pressure. As you get gold, you can spend it in a few places. It can be on large upgrades, pieces of gear, on runes to craft mythics you need, or on gems or gem fragments, because those things are like goddamn Bitcoin this season. Thanks, Witch Gems. Speaking of Witch Gems, I opted for Friend in the Bog because it was just a flat primary stat and health increase, which is just more damage. But at endgame, once you have all your witch powers, Voice of the Stars will give Bloodwave the most bang for your buck. And early on, you can grab Phantom String for a nice little boost, if you have the Jewel Fragment. For witch powers, I run Aura Siphoning, Hexa Whispers, and Soul Harvest, and Aura Specialization. As of this video, I still haven't gotten level 10 on Aura Specialization, meaning I'm missing crit damage bonus. Purging Touch is an endgame power suggested in the guide, but doesn't really do much for you until you have Voice of the Stars, because it can't convert Bloodwave to an Eldritch effect to get the effect without Voice of the Stars. Until then, I've been running Aura of Misfortune for more movement speed. Tornado is a big power we run, but I just got it while recording this video, so I haven't even gotten to use it yet. I'm sure it's good, because it just pulls things in. So, kind of closing thoughts on this build. I'd rank Bloodwave as a very obviously S+ tier build, not only because of how far it can go, but more so because of how ridiculously strong it is right out the gate. The lack of investment and time needed to get to endgame with this build is shocking. I think it creates a world where most people will want to just roll necromancers because of this build, and that's not a terrible thing, as I think every class should get their season to pop off and shine. It's just odd to see a very Diablo 3 style power spike in Diablo 4, but maybe that's where the game could end up, and that's not necessarily the end of the world. Bloodwave is great for pit pushing, an easy, comfortable build to play. I hope you have fun getting started with it, and I hope you enjoyed listening to a cat endlessly yap about how to get started as a goth blood surfer. I enjoyed Bloodwave a lot, though it was lacking an AoE clear for speeding content like Hordes and Nightmare Dungeons, so I think I might... Well, that's for a future video, if y'all are interested. Anyway, I'm sleepy. I'm gonna rest now. If you want to see me play this or other ARPGs live, I stream on Twitch Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific. If you liked the video, press the buttons. If you want to see more, let me know in the comments. Have a good one, and sleep well.